In what may be considered the most curious presidential election in a lifetime, we're faced with some of the most remarkable candidates I think we've ever seen. And it may be that we're being asked to elect the evil of two lessers this time around because nobody seems to be very popular. But as we look at the bid for the vice presidency of the Republican Party, we see a man who really seems to want to push us back into the intellectual dark ages and move our country back at least a century with respect to his religious ideologies and how he would try to impose that on this nation if he ever had the opportunity. I'm Ed Golly. This is the Atheist Forum. Hope you'll stay with us for a while as we really look in depth at this candidate, find out what he really wants for America. I'm joined on the set by Joe Reinhardt. And Joe,
Thank you.
Where do we start with a fellow like this?
Well, you know, there's a pretty good list of things to not like about Mike Pence. I think that it's a good idea, however, to take a look at this list because there's so much attention being focused on Donald Trump that Pence is more or less flying under the radar. And he has a track record that ought to give pause to anybody who appreciates the separation of church and state, who appreciates that we are a secular nation and always have been, and that we ought to always stay that way. First off, let's start with intelligent design. Surprise, surprise, Mike Pence is a big supporter of intelligent design. He has said, and I quote, "Only the theory of intelligent design provides even a remotely rational explanation for the known universe." I don't know about the unknown universe, which is most of the universe as far as Mike Pence is concerned. His knowledge on the subject is pretty well confined, apparently.
Sounds to me like another scientific conclusion drawn on the complete lack of any science. These people who never do any science seem to really know which science is credible and which isn't. In fact, they don't even know the definition of science and think typically that it's all just a matter of guesswork, and it must be a wrong guess because they don't like the conclusion.
You know, this issue was really pretty well settled in the Kreitzmiller versus Dover, Pennsylvania case, which was actually settled by a Bush appointee who described himself as a conservative. And he stated categorically that creationism has no place in the school system. It is a religious doctrine. It is not science, and it is ought not to be taught as science. End of story. Mike Pence either never heard of Dover, Pennsylvania, or he doesn't care. And I say that he doesn't care because the legal expenses that came out of that case ran into the millions of dollars, some of which was paid for by various religious freedom support groups, but a lot of which was also paid for by the taxpayers of Dover, Pennsylvania, a city not known for its excessive wealth to begin with. So Mike Pence is perfectly happy to squander untold millions of dollars and waste who knows how many hours in attorney's time and legal fees for the sole purpose of promoting his religious views to the disadvantage of our Constitution and to the disadvantage of the other 10,000 religions on this planet. Luckily for Mike Pence, he picked the only one that's correct.
Not to mention the fact that of all the age groups that he would want to target to try to convince them that that evolution never happened, the millennials would be the least attractive target because they are the age group, I believe it's like 18 to 25, that has a radically higher proportion of non-believers and nuns. In other words, people who simply reject religion, who are going to be the most difficult to convince of this nonsense. If anything, he should go after the Social Security crowd. He might have a little better shot there, but of course the unfortunate part is they typically are the higher percentage of the population that votes and could make the catastrophic decision to put this man in power.
Well, he's also a climate denier.
Wonderful.
So,
Which doesn't mean he denies there's a climate, but that he denies that it's changing due to the influence of the Industrial Revolution and
they
burning of
can't
fossil
deny
fuels.
that the Earth is getting hotter. I mean, that's a fact you can't statistically ignore.
Hell, I can't wear a jacket in the studio anymore. I don't know how you do it. I've had it. I'm out. It's as good as it gets.
That's all the proof we need, right there. It was hot this afternoon.
That's my science. How about you?
Ed Golly is convinced. That's all it takes. Abortion. No, I mean, I know
But
Mike Pence is an abortion,
but no.
he's opposed to abortion.
Joe,
is
if I
the
could just
point
back up a
that I wanna
second, though,
make.
you know,
Go ahead.
Carl Sagan understood this 20 years ago when he wrote his last book just prior to his death in 1995. And he understood that the increase in carbon dioxide in the atmosphere was having an effect on the climate and warming it. The chart that he published in his book went up to 350 parts per million. And so he considered that to be a danger level. And yet we heard just a couple years ago that at the monitoring station out in Hawaii, middle of the Pacific, so it's not influenced by geography or dense traffic or whatever, or industrial regions, had their first day that they could announce for the full entire 24-hour cycle, they measured in excess of 400 parts per million. This would have really gotten Sagan's attention, and yet these non-scientists who can simply dismiss all science with a wave of the hand because they do know science, meaning they implement no science, they don't know how, they don't know what it means, they just don't like the results of it, so they say, well, it's just a bad guess by a bunch of pencil-necked, bespectacled geeks in white lab coats who are looking for grants to keep them busy. And that's why they're so irresponsible. They don't understand the science because they don't want to. They want us to believe that, you know, that this whole measurable event is not taking place because they don't want to make any changes in the status quo.
Well, that will catch up with them sooner or later, and they'll get to pay the price right along with the rest of us.
Sure, and again, it's the millennials that I think take the keenest interest in clean energy, solar power, wind power, tidal range power supply stations. They are the ones that want the clean power. So it may be that we need to wait for that generation to mature so that they would find a candidate like this utterly intolerable and unable to ever gain any significant percentage of the voting population to even make a bid for these high offices. We can only hope that we survive as a species that long
enough
for
to
them to
do
grow
that.
up. Yes.
Yeah, Mike Pence is of the mind, I think, that if a fact disagrees with his point of view, that you need to change the fact,
Right.
rather than him change his mind.
Exactly.
That is the nature of intolerance and bigotry, and it's the classic definition of stupidity.
I think you were steering us toward the abortion issue.
He is virulently, rabidly anti-abortion. He has stated that if he and Trump are elected, that Roe v. Wade will be overturned. That's all I need to know. You can look at his record as governor of Indiana, where he signed a bill that put a woman in jail for 40 years. She was sentenced to well, they couldn't really prove whether it was an abortion or a spontaneous abortion, or whether it was self-induced. And nevertheless, they were perfectly happy to prosecute it to the nth degree. So that's just an example in action of what life will be like in a Mike Pence ruled world. And I know the vice president doesn't have that kind of power, but under Trump, it's been bandied about that he may, not unlike Cheney, do most of the duties of the presidency. So he'll be handling a lot more power, and Trump is a target and always will be. So that's subject to change in a heartbeat.
Of course, and come on, Joe, we know the puppeteer was Dick Cheney, right? Mm-hmm. And W was just the image of a president. And I think, too, that this begs the conversation about the type of judges that a Pence presidency and probably even a Trump presidency would be putting on the federal benches, and of course the most dangerous place, the Supreme Court, judges who think that the Bible is actually our Constitution instead of the Constitution, and want all of our laws based on these ancient and primitive and outdated ideologies.
Pence is still in favor of federal funding for the anti-gay or the gay conversion therapy. And his positions on LGBT issues are almost without exception on the wrong side of those issues. The bottom line is the guy's a religious nutcase. If he had his way, we'd be living in a theocracy, or we'd certainly be living in a society far more dominated by the Christian religion, or Mike Pence's view of the Christian religion. I'm not sure what it is. As I said at our last show, he used to be a Catholic, and now he's evangelical. And how you can convert that easily from two Christian sects that are diametrically opposed to each other. Who knows? Next week, as I said again at our last show, he may decide to be a whirling dervish by the time inauguration rolls around.
But he did come out and state that homosexuals should be converted to heterosexuals. So he's essentially creating a problem where there isn't one.
Yeah, right.
And then attempting to solve it in a way that it can't be solved because it isn't a problem in the first place. But I wonder if we asked him at what age he decided to become a heterosexual, he could pin that down to us within a week or two. What do you think?
I don't think he's made the decision yet, and which is not uncommon. The more homophobic people are, the more closeted and latently homosexual they are. And they've actually done tests and studies along that line and found that to be the case. So my guess is that Pence still has one foot in the closet and he just can't help himself.
And can we cite any difficulties of any kind that have come about in our culture since the national legalization of same-sex marriage? I can think of none. Can you? I mean, we haven't heard of
marauding bands of homosexuals who would break into people's kitchen and have sex on the table during dinner. That
molesting entire kindergartens at a time.
That
where do these things happen?
Yeah.
They haven't at all. So we have been gripped in this utterly foundationless fear-mongering for, 100 years, I suppose, since we could even acknowledge.
It turned out that the homosexual agenda was basically to come home, have dinner, watch the news and a movie, and get to bed early.
And now we've got to live with that in the entire country.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
That's
how
horrible.
will we survive?
That's horrible. The people next door might be doing that right now.
Yes.
I never think of anything else.
Well, before we get to the last couple issues on him, let's talk very quickly and briefly about Atheists of Florida, a membership organization based out of Tampa, Florida. We have membership rates that are extremely attractive to those who would care. But it does involve cash,
Oh,
yes.
yeah, money.
But really, to support our organization and our activities besides this program include outreach events, the meetings that we have, and special events like our Skeptic Camp, plus, of course, just keeping an ear to the ground about state-church separation issues that affect either our local communities or our state. Somebody's got to speak out against them. And remember, Joe, one person standing on the street corner with a sign looks like a nutcase, but a dozen people protesting something can be taken quite seriously, especially when they are right. So if you'd like to join, you can get our newsletter. You can, of course, see our newsletters on the internet, or you can have one delivered to your doorstep by uniform messenger if you are a member. You can vote in our elections and take much more participatory involvement in the organization by being a member of Atheists of Florida. All the information's on our website. You know how to find that better than I.
You know, along that same line, Ed, I'd like to put out a call for any of our viewers or members who would like to be a guest on the Atheist Forum. Take any position you like on any moral issue. We'd be happy to discuss the pros and cons. I'll be happy to prove you biblically incorrect no matter what issue you decide to defend or to condemn. By the same token, if you would like to produce a spot to be aired as a segment, either a one-time event or an ongoing segment, the outrage of the day, the catastrophe of the week, the deconversion of the week, whatever. We'd be happy to work with you. We have cameras, editing facilities, expertise that we can bring to the party. So we would welcome people who would like to be a guest on our show, who would like to be a commentator and actually do the show, or who would like to do a segment, a couple minutes or so, whatever it takes to cover the topic. We welcome all of those. So get off your and
Sure.
start on that right away.
If you're a Bible thumper who would like an opportunity to explain to Joe why he has his head so far up his digestive entrails that he can see out his own throat, we'll give you a whole hour
That's right.
to talk about it. Come on down.
That's right.
We dare you.
We'll do it. We'll do it at your facility.
Sure.
And you can pack the audience with people who are ready to throw rotten fruit at anyone for the slightest provocation.
And of course, we may or may not be able to Skype somebody in, but if we need to, we'll find a way to do it.
Yes.
But it's best to do it face to face.
Yep.
Okay. Anything else on Pence that you wanted to bring
No,
to the table?
I think I've badmouthed Michael Pence, not as much as he deserved, but all that I could think of at the moment.
Wish I had his hair cut.
Yeah, right.
But
yeah, he's
we'll
got
get
hair.
to that.
He's got hair for brains, I think.
Yes.
No, I wanted to talk about, and we spoke about him a little bit last session, and that is Ray, the Banana Man, Comfort. We spoke last week about his being at the ARC experience and handing out cards
Yes.
and stating that no atheist was competent to hold public office, that they were too dangerous to hold public office. In the meantime, I won't even bother to mention the title, but Ray Comfort has a new movie coming out, and I subscribe to, tell me news having to do with religion in my news feeds. And it's interesting because Ray Comfort is able to completely destroy atheism with one question. It doesn't tell you what the question is.
Oh.
It tells you that for $20 you can buy his movie that shows him asking people that question.
Right.
People who, strangely enough, I think already agreed with Ray Comfort. But one question is all it takes. Now, Benjamin Franklin says, you can summarize the volumes, the libraries full of religious documents written by the great divines as in the following way. It's a synopsis of entire libraries, which is, 'tis so, 'tis not. That's all they say in the final analysis. And lo and behold, after all of this time and all these millions of pages, happily, luckily for us, Ray Comfort has one sentence that can do what legions that preceded him were unable to do, and that is to convince someone, anyone, one way or the other, as to the veracity of their beliefs.
Nice.
So you have to admire Ray Comfort for doing that, and I think it may be even more successful than his previous effort, which was The Atheist Nightmare. I recommend you go to the YouTube, type in The Atheist Nightmare, up will come the Banana Man, Ray Comfort with a banana. Again, we've talked about this in the past, and he explains how the banana is the perfect example of food that evolved or that was created, pardon me, by the Almighty. It fits the hand perfectly, it peels right away, you can eat it. Forget about the phallic metaphor there.
Mm-hmm.
It's color-coded, it turns dark when it's bad, etc.
Green when it's...
And when he gets done blabbering about the banana, an Australian guy who has the rebuttal to his argument comes on, highlights briefly his main points, and fairly, and then all he does is hold up a pineapple. And then he cuts to a film of a guy whacking a coconut with a machete, which is hard to do without cutting off 2 or 3 of your fingers, I'm sure. So much for the idea that God has prepared food specifically and created it specifically for man to eat. And that's why they call him the banana man. I do know what the question is that destroys atheists. I read the question. It didn't destroy me. And the fact that Ray Comfort doesn't know the answer to this question either doesn't bother me in the least. And it's no more convincing than Ray the Banana Man. But the difference was you could find out about the banana for free. It cost you $20 to find out this question. And
Was it possible you just didn't quite understand the question, Joe?
well, it's entirely possible, but I'll tell you this much, and it's one of the things I admire about Ray Comfort, and that is that, like myself, he's only in it for the money.
Okay. Did the Ark ever open for business up in Kentucky?
It did, as a matter of fact, and the opening was, I guess, a bit of a disappointment.
No.
I saw photographs that had these long, queues ready for the people to stand in line, like at the airport. They were all empty. The Ark itself was very few people. At $40 a head
Lucy.
to trot through the thing, I can understand why people might be a little bit reluctant
Suffering
to
floodwaters.
take that tour. Yeah, no kidding.
Holy.
In any case,
Well-
I guess it was apparently a bit of a disappointment, so it may take them a little longer to get our $100 million back than they thought it would.
I'd sure hate to be the bank that needs to repossess that.
Yeah, right.
What would you do with it? But no, I'm thinking that.
Could you
Yeah, 'cause
float,
it
float
won't-
a loan for that?
That's an investment song. But I thought maybe all the people who had a genuine curiosity about it and were gullible enough to buy the story, even in this day and age when we all, those of us who understand a modicum of science realize that this whole concept is a physical impossibility, had come and seen it for the free open house, right? When they, for that first week when they opened the doors, didn't they allow people to come and tour?
The article I read didn't mention that,
Oh,
but even
I
at
thought
free,
when
it
we saw those
was disappointing. So you can take that from there.
Yeah, and they overpaid
Yeah,
the
right.
admission. Okay. So,
Anyhow, that's about all I had to say about the Ark, other than the point that you just made. I'd like to reinforce that, the idea that it took $100 million and an army of Amish craftsmen to put this thing together, whereas it only took Noah and 3 or 4 helpers and no money whatsoever to build the same Ark.
yeah.
And that, post-flood, there were a lot of supernatural goings on, but I don't recall anything in the Bible that hints or states that the actual building of the Ark was accomplished in any supernatural way. I mean, Noah and his sons were out there building away, and other people came by and scoffed, and he just said, well, we'll see you in hell,
Yeah.
not at the bottom of the ocean.
Even, of course, even marine life would have been decimated
Much of
by covering the entire world with salt water, because the nurseries and the estuaries and the seagrass beds where so much of the sea life spawns would be too deep to be effective spawning grounds anymore. And of course they wouldn't survive for a year without any, without sufficient sun coming down through, so that they would all, even when the water went away, wherever in the world it went, you wouldn't have the same types of estuaries available.
The list of things that could not possibly happen without supernatural intervention having to do with the Ark is probably long enough to
Sure.
fill up a roll
And
of
if
paper
supernatural
from here to the street.
intervention was sufficient to make these things work, why not just supernaturally get rid of everybody, and then Noah wouldn't have had to build the Ark,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Just make everybody poof,
And I know
disappear.
the last we discussed the Ark on our last show, so I don't want to get too repetitious,
I
but
guess you're right.
the point is this, and that is, well, why didn't God just start with Jesus to begin with and save us about
Right.
4,000 years of misery? But, God works in mysterious ways, and so does random chance, but
Yes.
that's another argument for another time.
Well, it is going to be a curious election, and no telling how it's going to come out. But either way, it's probably going to keep us on the edge of our seat as we wonder how these people could be the candidates in this country of 300 million people, right? How do these two come to the top of the heap?
One word, Ed, one word. Passport.
Is that so? Okay. So we'll be watching with all the rest of you, and hope you'll be watching the Atheist Forum when time permits. And hope you'll join us again on a future Atheists of Florida that comes to you. Atheist Forum that comes to you as a production of the Atheists of Florida. So until then, along with Joe Reinhardt, I'm Ed Golly, reminding you, if the story seems a little too implausible to be true, don't believe it just because somebody wrote it down.
Make them prove it.